Welcome to BookPal's AuthorConnect podcast, where we host conversations with today's leading authors. I'm your host, Tony DiCostanzo, the president of BookPal. We're going to be diving into a really exciting conversation today with a former Owl Award winning author. So stick around for some amazing conversation. Today's guest is a 23-year associate of FranklinCovey and serves as their executive vice president of thought leadership. He shares my passion for great conversation and hosts multiple podcasts, including FranklinCovey's On Leadership and Great Life, Great Career. Definitely go check those out. He is the author of a multi-week Amazon #1 release, Owl Award-winning book, Management Mess to Leadership Success, 30 Challenges to Become the Leader You Would Follow. In June, he launched the second book in his Mess to Success series, Marketing Mess to Brand Success. And there it is. It's a fantastic book. And just Tuesday of this week, he launched his latest book, yes, Master Mentors, which is what we're going to be diving into today. Please welcome me in joining Scott Miller for some fantastic conversation. Scott,
Tony,
welcome.
thank you. Not just am I a former OWL winner, but maybe someday a future one. You never know. Right?
You might be the first to achieve two-time winning status.
I will try hard. Everybody vote for me.
So for the audience that maybe isn't as familiar with Master Mentors, do you want to paint a little overview of this book and how you kind of came to write it through your On Leadership podcast conversations?
Yeah, delighted to. First of all, thanks for the spotlight, Tony. I'm delighted to be on the show today. So my name is Scott Miller. I served as the chief marketing officer for FranklinCovey, now my 25th year with the firm. And about a year and a half ago, no, that's not true, about 2.5 years ago, we launched this podcast, as everybody did in the world, right? Called On Leadership with Scott Miller. And it was both an audio and video podcast. And we landed some great guests early on. And of course, with our own network, having sold, close to 55 million copies of all of our books, we had a few connections and a few thought leaders of our own. Well, one thing I'm good at is I'm good at cadence. Like I'm actually good at sticking with something and not bailing early. Marriage, parenting, writing. And so here we found ourselves 150 weeks, 3 years into this podcast, and it had grown to become, can you believe it, the world's largest leadership podcast. It hits about 6 million every Tuesday. And our guests, became bigger and bigger. Ursula Burns and Matthew McConaughey and Seth Godin and Liz Wiseman and Dan Pink and on. Catherine Schwarzenegger-Pratt. We've got Will Smith coming on and Sanjay Gupta, Bill Gates. So about a year ago, I approached HarperCollins and said, you know what, can I tell you, in addition to what the nuggets are that are shared on the podcast, which is again, video and audio, there's some cool stuff shared off the air. Before in the green room, metaphorically, or in the elevator, whatever it was, or on the way to the car. And so with the permission of 30 of the first 100 guests, I highlighted a single transformational insight from each of them. This is not Good to Great or War and Peace. This is a fast, easy, breezy read. And I think it's kind of a start anywhere, go everywhere book. And I'm delighted to get into some of the master mentors.
No, that's fantastic. What's interesting is as I started reading the book, to be 100% honest, the first chapter was like extremely gripping. You had this, guest on your show that came from a position of disability that absolutely no one could relate to, despite any challenges in their life. They couldn't compare to what this gentleman went through. And, it's just started pulling you in from the beginning. But as you read, everything was full of little nuggets that got you thinking. And then the real challenge became, I already read a lot of books, as you can imagine. You mentioned reading hundreds of books, and every chapter is like, oh, I need to buy that book. Oh, that one, that one's unique too. So, it was fantastic from that perspective. I have to imagine it was difficult to pick the 30 people from 100, given how strong these people are that are on your show.
No, it was just whoever gave me permission. That's why.
Oh, okay.
I'm kidding. No, it of course was. Now, the good news is HarperCollins has me writing 10 volumes of this. So volume 2 is already under development. It'll be out in 2022. But the book is, as you know, very episodic. In fact, one publisher didn't want to touch it because they thought it was too episodic. But I learned some lessons from some authors that, your first date isn't always your best marriage, right? So I went to a publisher who had the vision, HarperCollins Leadership. It's intentionally episodic. I talk about brain health. I talk about emotional agility. I talk about your circadian cycle and strategy and branding and marketing and PowerPoint. And it's meant to be kind of, the new chicken soul for the soup, or chicken soup for the soul.
Yeah. Well, and that's fantastic, because it is such an approachable book. You can pick up, read, 3 chapters, you get some insights. You can actually maybe act on those insights and make some changes to the way you think about a situation. I was impressed by your schedule. Is that, you talk about it in the Daniel Pink section, where I think you get up at 4 a.m. or something absolutely insane. That doesn't work for me. But, has that been something that you've maintained for a while, given your writing schedule?
It is. It is. What you're referring to, of course, is Dan Pink, who's become a friend of mine. He endorsed the first book that won the Al Award, Management Mess. The Leadership Says. He wrote this book, as you know, called When, all about timing. And I'm embarrassed, Tony, but I was 50 years old. I'm 53 now, when I first discovered this concept called your circadian rhythm, or your circadian cycle. I'd never heard of it before. And so the more I realized it, I realized we all have a peak, a trough, and a recovery. I'd never named it before. In fact, Seth Godin told me the business he was in was naming stuff so people could solve it, right? Or so that people could think about it. I think Dan Pink, who didn't invent the circadian rhythm, but he popularized it in his book, it helped me understand my peak is 4 a.m. to about 10 a.m. My highest energy, it's when my creative genius is at its best. It's when I am doing my most difficult thinking, my strategic thinking. And then I hit a bit of a lull, about 11 a.m. to about 1 to 2 p.m. That's kind of my trough. My energy is low. I want to eat lunch. I want a big carb lunch, right? No quinoa hun or kale during lunch. I want, something big and protein. And then I hit a bit of a recovery in the afternoon. I've always been this way. I've always been an early riser. And by the way, I go strong. I go really strong until 9 o'clock. And then at 9:30, I am asleep. I am never awake, ever, after 10 p.m. at night, because I need 7 hours of sleep. So if I sleep from, 10 to 4, that's only 6 hours. I am up at 4 like clockwork, writing, reading, thinking. And the insight for me, Tony, was once I understood my cycle, so to speak, I needed my employees to understand. Because if you want to have your one-on-one at 2 p.m., good luck. If you want to start, a coaching call at 4, I've already worked 12 hours, during the day. So it was helpful for the team.
Maxwell talks about that a little bit in the context of even trials and judicial decisions being impacted negatively when they're after lunch, so there's a lot of, crossover to these.
When is the best time to be in front of the parole board? Never, right? But if you have to be, you want to be the first appointment in the morning. Same with surgery, right? You want to be first up. Great book.
So from a, morning standpoint, do your kids keep you in some alone time in that early thing, or are they waking up early?
My kids, I have 3 sons. They are 7, 9, and 11. My wife, Stephanie, and I are both early risers. She's not a 4 a.m. riser, but she's a full-time mom and manager of the family, so she doesn't have to go at 4, right? That is her profession. But I've always been an early riser. My kids tend to be early risers also. For being young, they're always up by 6. Weekends, I don't run a regimented schedule in the mornings. But I believe in sleep. I believe in the power. I'm not one of these high-performing people that gets by on 4 hours of sleep. It was Dr. Daniel Amen, the famous neuroscientist who's in the book, that talked to me about brain sleep is when the brain washes itself, literally like a car. And sleep is so important. So for those of you who pride yourself on getting little sleep, you should reassess. Your body needs more sleep, whether you think it does or not. Your brain needs to rest and wash itself of the toxins so it can perform at its peak function.
I would say one of the stories from my previous life was I was part of a turnaround team at a healthcare company. And, at the time when I was much younger, I was CFO, and we were traveling to the Bay Area and Chicago every week, and be gone 4 days a week. I had 2 kids under the age of 2 at home, and terrible mess for my wife to be stuck in. But I was literally doing all-nighters 150 nights a year, and during this period, I wound up losing about 60 pounds and had 2 visits to the hospital for heart palpitations. And they said, you have to get sleep, so it started to be this eye-opening moment of, yes, you can power through a lot of things, but it's not great on your body what you're doing to it. So what was fascinating to me about that chapter was a little bit less about sleep and more about the just pure damage that any kind of, head trauma could do. Do you want to maybe?
I'd love to.
Yeah,
I'd love to expand. So the chapter we're talking about, of course, is Dr. Daniel Amen. He owns the 9 Amen clinics. He's written dozens of best-selling books. He's on PBS all the time. He is a board-certified psychiatrist who's also a brain imaging expert and a neuroscientist. He's kind of the Dr. Oz of the brain. He's a lovely human being. I know him extremely well. He's a bit avant-garde, a bit unconventional in the medical industry, but I think he is a pioneer in helping people understand that your brain is really like tofu. It's like jelly. And you had this super sharp skull that is protecting it, in quotation marks. You got a sharp skull protecting a tofu object. And I was in Wausau, Wisconsin yesterday, Tony, giving a keynote on master mentors. And I was talking to the audience and I said, what most people don't know is your husband, your ex-husband, your father-in-law, your brother, your mother, whoever it is that's had 2 marriages or 3 marriages and 7 jobs and 4 bankruptcies, it may be because they were the victim of a brain injury falling out of their bunk bed when they were 9.
Yeah.
And it went untreated, or they fell off their scooter, or they had a flag football injury in, junior high school. That our prefrontal cortex and our amygdala, these are very delicate items that you got to protect with your life. I caught a lot of flack about 3 months ago. I have a fairly large social media following, and I put my children on it quite frequently, to their horror. And I put a picture of, I have just purchased my youngest son a very expensive motorized scooter.
Yeah.
And I made it very clear, if it has wheels, you have a helmet.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a hoverboard, a skateboard, a bike. If it has wheels, you wear a helmet. And sure enough, he defied me. So I walked out and I threw this brand new motorized scooter in the garbage can with great Scott Miller flair. There's a lot of hack on social for my, donate this. No. I'm not donating. It's mine. I'll do what I want with it. I needed to ensure that my boys understand your life can be irreparably altered if you fall and hit your head. You have got to take as much care of your brain as you do the rest of your body parts, the ones you see and the ones that you don't see. I'm become an evangelist for brain protection. And I'm not a very popular dad. My kids will never play football. They won't play lacrosse. They're not going to play soccer because you cannot have a ball bouncing on your head. My kids, they snow ski, no tricks. They play tennis, they swim. And so I'm all into sports, but I'm that unpopular dad where I've just lost all my followers in Texas and Oklahoma now. I'm not a fan of football.
My oldest son, who's now a freshman in college, when he was a freshman in high school, he's a pretty tall kid. He's part of the basketball team, but he got recruited to be on the football team, and all of a sudden the kibosh from mom came in, and he started having some friends that were getting hurt, and went back to her and thanked her for not letting him do it. So
if your listeners and viewers heard Dr. Daniel Amen talk about what's happening in the NFL and the number of bankruptcies and tragedies and suicides and marriages and all the patients he treats, all of the hundreds of former NFL patients, you would never let your child play football again. And I know this is not a popular topic. I like watching football on television. Not my boys.
And there, actually, you mentioned, I think earlier, that you were hosting Will Smith, who was in the movie about this.
Right. He has a new book coming out called Will, co-authored by Mark Manson, who wrote the book The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F. So I'm excited about that interview.
No, that's fantastic. When you mentioned, I think, hosting Nick, the first chapter in the book, at your home and on the podcast. I think, as we go through something as serious as a global pandemic, stress levels are elevated, people's perspective starts to become engrossed in all the ways that their life has been impacted, in some cases positive, but most of the ways negative, trapped at home, limited access to friends. I think pursuing a life of gratitude and recognizing the values you have is something that we don't want to lose sight of in stressful situations. I think highlighting that a little bit in this chat today might be beneficial, for perspective.
I'm delighted you set this up. Who you're referring to is Nick Vujicic, right?
Yeah.
A gentleman.
I apologize, by the way. When I saw his name, knew I would butcher it.
Fine. It's fine. It's fine. He's actually Australian by birth, Texan now by choice, right? He was born with no limbs, no arms and no legs. You may recognize him. In the book, I have a card deck. This is Nick Vujicic. So I have a card deck on each of the mentors that I use for all my keynotes. And Nick Vujicic is about 35 years old, lives in Texas, was raised kind of in LA, was born with no limbs, no arms, no legs. He has a head, a neck, a torso. His body ends at just beneath his groin and has a small kind of foot-like appendage with a couple of toes that he can text with. That's it. Nick has gone on to live a remarkable life of inspiration. He has written hundreds of or dozens of books and had millions of people hear him speak around the world. And what was remarkable is I share a story about being in Nick's presence at my home. I talk about what it's like to sit across from Nick. And I was having a dinner party where Nick was the guest. And I was watching Nick scratch his head on my sofa like a cat, my custom built purple velvet sofa. And here's Nick like scratching his head, because the rest of us can just do this, right? Or we can change our lenses, or we can type, or we can take a drink of water. And here I was taking a drink of water at the time, realizing I don't even recall picking up the glass. Yeah. Nick cannot drink water. He cannot scratch his head with his hands. He cannot use the restroom. He cannot flee a burning building. He cannot feed himself. He can't clothe himself. He can do lots of things with no arms and no legs. And it was just, the whole chapter is about me having this epiphany around how ungrateful I am in life. Born a Catholic, still a Catholic, I have a huge conscience. I believe in social justice. I was raised to be abundant and generous. And I think those are true, but don't confuse abundance and generosity with gratitude.
Yeah.
And it was Nick that completely changed my life.
Yeah.
And in the chapter, I write about, it was Hiram Smith, who was the co-founder of the FranklinCovey company with Dr. Covey, that coined this phrase. If we truly want to be grateful, we see the world through three lenses. I have to, I ought to, and I get to. And I think I wrote a story in the book around how on Sunday evenings when it's 0 degrees in January in Utah, and I got to take the garbage out. I have to take the garbage out. I got to slide across the driveway, get this iced over. I'm in my pajamas. And then I realize, tomorrow morning is garbage day. I got to take the garbage cans, 3 of them out 70 yards down to the road. I'm cursing the whole time. What I realize is Nick Vujicic cannot take out the garbage.
Yeah.
And so I say to everyone in the book, reframe everything in your life from I have to, through I ought to I get to.
Yeah.
In the last year and a half, I haven't complained once about taking the garbage out, because what Nick Vujicic would give to just once take out the garbage. The chapter I think is powerful, but I wanted everyone to read it and just have a bit of a better sense of where could you be more grateful in your life?
Yeah. No, and I think, there's so many aspects of gratitude that I think, there, in a lot of ways, when I was born as an altar boy family, Catholic myself, and there is a certain amount that the religion teaches about guilt. It's not about being guilted into religion, or guilted into gratitude. It's more about the fact that when we certainly appreciate the things that are going well in our life, it just makes us happy, less stressed. It's not something that we are obligated to feel. It's something that we ought to feel, because there is so many positive things around us, friends, family, but we lose sight of that and take it for granted.
I think, to your point, Tony, one of the most profound things I've heard in my life, and I spent my life around best-selling authors and business titans and big celebrities my entire life, 30 years, is this concept from Hiram Smith to reframe everything in life.
Yeah.
I get to terminate this person tomorrow because this is the wrong fit for us and for them. I get to help them start a new life, right? I get to have a high courage conversation with one of my children about this because this will help to change their life. I get to pay 1/10 of my Visa bill this month because it's all I can afford, but I get to pay 1/10 of it.
Yeah.
I think it's so simple, it's profound, and it really has had a remarkable it's had a remarkable peace that it's given me during the pandemic. I don't know about you, but I get to get a vaccine.
Yeah.
My kids get to go to school in person.
I get to spend more time with them at home.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Don't lose sight of the opportunity.
Thank you for highlighting that chapter.
It resonated with me. We recently hosted authors of Living with Gratitude, and fantastic conversation, great podcast. Would recommend On Leadership. Host them if they haven't been already.
And if you ever want to interview Nick Vujicic, I'm happy to make a connection. We're dear friends.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. As you sort of progress through the chapter, the chapters in the book, Multipliers stuck me as something that kind of resonated. I actually immediately ordered the book. I'm obviously familiar with the book. It's a top-selling title. I just hadn't put it in my library yet. But it was one that you highlighted as being one of the most impactful books you've read, which of course, I was like, I got to check this out. Would love to hear more about that specific experience of reading the book and how it affected your leadership style.
Sure. Who you're referring to is Liz Wiseman, right? She is Master Mentors number 19, and she's a former Oracle 2-decade, the equivalent of a chief learning officer at Oracle. She left a decade ago and wrote this book called Multipliers. And here's the big idea. The big idea is that as leaders, our job, of course, is not to be the genius in the room, but rather the genius maker of others. And that all of us are either multiplying talent, or we are, in her words, accidentally diminishing it. You aren't either a diminisher or you are a multiplier. That's bunk.
Yeah.
And Liz, and through her research, indicates that there are 9 accidental diminishing types: the idea fountain, the rescuer, the protector, the always on, the strategist, the perfectionist. For me, it was horrifying.
Yeah.
It was horrifying because
eye-opening. Yeah.
I was a classic diminisher. I kind of thought, as the chief marketing officer, my job was to be the most creative, the most genius, the most well-read. And in fact, I was diminishing my people, not as a sociopath. That's a deliberate diminisher, as an accidental diminisher. So Liz gives us wonderful gift of helping you understand which or any or all of these diminishing types do you find yourself falling into. And once you can feel it, name it, understand it, hear it, then you can pivot to creating more multiplying moments, asking bigger questions, providing space, igniting people's genius in them. For me, it was transformative. It actually led to me stepping down from the role of chief marketing officer. I stepped aside. I had my run. The CEO asked me to stay a dozen times. I said no. I'm still involved with the firm in an advisory capacity, but I realized that I'd spent too many years being the genius in the room and not the genius maker of others, because many cultures don't reward you being the genius maker, right? I mean, why do we need you if you're not the genius?
Yeah, so the facilitator.
Right. Facilitators are easily replaced in some cultures. So I strongly recommend Liz Wiseman's book, Multipliers. She has a new book coming out very soon called Impact Players, that I think is going to be a big book. But Multipliers is my favorite, most transformative book I've ever read.
That's fantastic. And I guess to connect this dots for the audience, the idea of being the genius in the room takes away from everybody else's contributions. That's how you kind of
That's right. As your job is the igniter of other people's genius, that you need to focus on not just recruiting, but retaining and building and pollinating people. I'm not doing the book justice, but I think the genius of Multipliers, the book, is to help you understand when are you accidentally diminishing others.
Yeah.
How can you follow a process of multiplying talent and sometimes playing a little smaller, sometimes stepping back, not always having the answer, not being the first person to comment or weigh in, and recognizing sometimes the power of your power and stepping back some. I think for extroverts like me, for people who are loud on personality and domineering, I have a ferocious personality, I've been told. And I have to sometimes be cognizant of that because I can dominate a conversation naturally.
Yep.
I'm uncomfortable with silence. And most multipliers aren't.
Interesting. Yeah, the connection I make there is Brene Brown was hosting the author of the coaching, the coaching habit, and the conversation became fascinating because it was this idea that we all love to think that our ideas are the right solution. And so we tend to give feedback very quickly when somebody says, hey, I have this problem, what do you think? Oh, of course we're right. So we spill what our solution is. And so their plea to the audience, if you will, was, be more curious, ask more questions. And then at that point, the person can, in a lot of ways, come to their own conclusion, and you've developed this new skill set of them to bridge this gap between having a problem and coming up with the solution on their own. And by the way, your solution that you're presenting is probably flawed because it's based on your own experiences and not every experience possible.
Nicely said. Dr. Covey would have called it effective leaders, humble leaders, are more concerned with what is right than being right. And I try to enter most conversations asking myself, am I more concerned with being right, or am I more concerned with what is right for the culture, for the client, for the shareholders, for the employees? That takes some maturity that I'm still working towards.
So we'll end with Stephanie McMahon, if you want to show her card.
Yes. I gotta find her. Stephanie McMahon is Master Mentor number 2, right? The Chief Brand Officer for WWE. That was a delightful interview. Interestingly, I don't share almost anything she said on air in the entire interview, right?
It was more about what she did.
That's right. It was more how she showed up. She was late. She was annoyingly late. Her team kept me apprised. I mean, it is Stephanie McMahon, right? I mean, she's on TV and has a series and married to a famous wrestler.
Billion-dollar business.
Running a billion-dollar company with, a billion social followers. But what was delightful was how gracious she was, because during the 10 minutes before we went live, by the way, her team let us know what her delay was. It was all very legitimate, right? We get it. But she showed up and she was so focused on us. Scott, who is your audience? What are they struggling with? What would they learn from me? How can I help you? And she had an iPad set up and it wasn't working properly. So Stephanie McMahon closed the iPad, found a laptop, got it connected. So it just, you might think, well, that's just being human. Well, I don't know, but that was being gracious. That was being interested. To quote Jim Collins, she was less interesting and more interested in what we needed. And I just thought it was a really nice way to say, I've interviewed a lot of B-level, C-level celebrities that think they're the you-know-what. And then you've got Stephanie McMahon, who's very focused on her brand, of course, but also focused on, Scott, how's my background? How's the lighting? Is this good for you? How's my volume? And I just interpreted it. And I'm no pushover, right? I've been around the block a few times. I just really felt it was Stephanie's genuine interest in creating a valuable experience for our podcast listeners. She doesn't need our podcast to make her famous, right? I mean,
she's already
no doubt she'll be the CEO someday. And I just thought it was a good example of, your brand really is how you show up on and off the camera.
And just the selfishness of not bringing ego, just I'm here for you, and this is your moment. So fantastic story, really resonated with me. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
I think we're approaching 10:30, so I'd like to be respectful of your time. Any parting thoughts for the audience as we wrap up?
The book is, like I said, it's episodic. It's here and there intentionally. Seth Godin, who's one of the mentors, has taught me, Scott, resist the idea of your total addressable market. You learned this in graduate school. Instead, focus on your smallest viable market, because not everyone is your reader, not everyone is your customer. In this book, however, I'll tell you, I think it's a broad book. It's not only for marketers or only for leaders or only for parents or only for widows. In many ways, I think Master Mentors is going to be the Chicken Soup for the Soul series this coming year. It's one of these books that has nuggets. You won't find every insight to be transformational. The book is kind of, it hits you where you are, when you are. And if you've learned or had something reinforced in 1 or 2 chapters, then home run for both of us.
Well, and that's the element where, you start to connect the dots. Something in your life is affecting you. You give them a little bit of an overview, but you also paint a picture in a lot of ways of where to get more information on that subject. So, you know, multipliers for me, I was like, you know what, as a leader of an organization, I need to be ensuring that I'm always working to develop my team. And so having that insight, you know, was something that I gravitated toward.
Master mentors might win an OWL award. Who knows?
Who knows? You know, we're coming into the witching hour towards the fourth quarter of the season.
I know.
So if anybody wants to connect with you through FranklinCovey, how would they do that?
Yeah, my wife says it's not difficult. She thinks I'm overexposed, which was not a compliment. You can connect me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, you name it, I'm there. You can visit my website, scottjeffreymiller.com. You can subscribe to the podcast at FranklinCovey. Just Google On Leadership with Scott Miller. Some great interviews coming up. Colin Cowie, the famous entertainer and event planner, wrote a book called The Gold Standard. He is our interview next week. It's an amazing interview in a book. I'm honored if you all wanted to subscribe to the podcast and pick up a copy of Master Mentors Volume 1. The first in 10 volumes from HarperCollins Leadership.
Yeah, and if you are interested in any books for your organization, you can feel free to email sales@bookpal.com, and we would love to help you with those for your company. We'll be sending out a recording of this through YouTube next week. So if you want to share it with anyone, it's got some great insights on his book, and I think definitely worth exploring with some of your colleagues. Our next AuthorConnect podcast will be October 7th with David Horsager about his book, Trusted Leader, where we'll be sharing a framework for building trust so you can and your organization can perform their best. Really excited to host you today, Scott.
Thank you,
awesome partner to BookPal and such a fun conversation. So thank you for spending some time.
I'm a raving fan of BookPal. Look forward to our BookPal. Look forward to our lunch in a few weeks. Good to see you.
That sounds awesome, Scott. Take care.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.